Hello everyone, welcome to Lab 8.3.7 from DevNet Associate course from Cisco. In the previous video or in the previous lab, you learned how to use netconf to access the iOS device, which is the router, virtual router. We used this one. In this lab, you are going to learn how to use RESTCONF to access the router, and you are going, of course, to use now Python, and before Python you are also going to use Postman to send the requests. This REST config is about dealing with the API. So let's see the tutorial. Here we are going, now we have 7 parts. In the first part we are going to create the network, I mean the virtual image in the background, this one with the router, this one here. So what we are going to do is to make sure that they are connected, as you know, or as we did in the previous lab. We are going to ping from the DevNet virtual image to the router virtual image, and we should have connectivity successfully established. And then we are going to create and configure Postman. We are going to use Postman to send a GET request and then to send a PUT request, and then we are going to repeat the process but using a Python script. Okay, so in a scenario here you can see that RESTCONF protocol provides a simplified subset of netconfig features over REST full API. What we did last video or last lab, on the previous one, we dealt with the iOS device or by the network device or on the virtual router with netconfig. Now we are going to use Postman and API. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so here we have the router, and here we changed the name of the router to new host to a new host name. And this is, we have done this last video. I did not restart the router. Okay, so of course you can change it again to the name. So enable configure terminal, and here we have host name. Then we just copy this, which is CSR 1KV. And here we have again the name of the router as it's given here, CSR 1KV. Okay, now let's check the IP address of this router, and then here we have the IP address, which is 192.168.56.101. Okay, so let's ping. Okay, so we have connectivity with the router, and now let's establish SSH session. Cisco 123 exclamation mark. Here we have successfully logged in through SSH. Here we have done with this. We have done with this one. In the second part, we are going to configure the iOS or the router, and you are going to learn how you will activate one of the daemons in the router. Okay, so let's do this now. Since we have SSH connection, so I'm going to use this one here. Let's match. we have all of them are running, as you can see here. And here we need to enable and verify the RESTCONF services, and here we need to make sure that RESTConfig is enabled. Configure terminal, and here we type this command. And in P we have to verify that the required RESTConfig daemons are now running. Recall that NCSSHT is the netconfig service which may be running on your device. We don't need it in this lab. So however, we do need the NGINX, which is the HTTPS server. Okay, this will allow you to make REST API calls for the REST config services. Okay, so what we need this one, and we don't need this one. So since it's running here, so I don't need to use or enable or to do step 3, because here, as you can see, this one, the NGINX is not running, and here there's a step that how to, in step 3 shows you how to enable it. So in your case, if you have this one is not running, so you have to do this step, which is configure terminal, and then IB HTTP secure server, and then you authenticate that this is a local server. And explanation is given here. Enter the following global configuration commands to enable the HTTPS server, and specify that server authentication should use the local database. Okay, and then exit from the global configuration mode, and then again type this command here, and you should see this one is running here. Okay, so in part 3 we are going to open and configure Postman. Okay, so let's do this. This is Postman here. In first step, we need to open with SSL certification verification, which we can do this through File, Settings. Okay, in part 4, we are going to use Postman to send GET requests. Here, in step 1, we need to explore the Postman. So let's close this. Tabs here, and here we have the Launchpad from the Launchpad. Here you can explore them. Okay, so I'm not going to explore it now. And then from the plus, we can open a get untitled request. This interface is where you will do all of your work in this lab. Okay, here we have untitled request. In step 2, we are going to enter the URL for the CSR1KV, and as you can see, the URL is here. So we will copy this URL, and here we enter the URL. And in the next step, we are going to enter authentication credentials. As you can see here, under the URL, we have many tabs here: params, authorization, headers, body, prerequisite, script test, and settings. In this lab, we are going to use authorization, headers, and body. Okay, so let's do this, and let's start with authorization. And we choose basic author. And here we have the username and the password. I'm not going to change them because they are the same. We already used them before in previous labs, in one of the previous labs. And let's go to the headers. We click the 7 headers here, and we have here the verification, as is mentioned here, that you can verify that the authorization key has a base that will be used to authenticate the request when it is sent to the CSR1KV. As you can see here, we have in step number 4, we are going to set Json as the data type to send and receive from the router. So to do this, we are here under the headers. We are going to click on the first blank key, and we put the content of it like this one. And sorry, for the value, we are going to use this one here. So let's do this. And as you can see here, we have specified Json, and then we add another key, which is accept. And for the value, we put application yank data JSON. And it's written here that you can change the application yank data JSON to application yank data XML to send and receive the XML data instead of JSON data. Okay. In step 5, we are going to send the API request to the CSR1KV. Okay, now we can send the API request to the CSR1KV, and here is mentioned that Postman has now all the information it needs to send the GET request. So click send. And as you can see here, the problem was with the password. Now I have the information here, which is matches here this one. Now this JSON response verifies that Postman can now send the REST API request to the router. Okay, so let's move forward to step 6, and now we are going to use GET request to gather information for all interfaces on the router. So now, as you can see here in A, now that you have the successful GET request, you can use it as a template for additional requests. At the top of the Postman, next to the Launchpad, tab right click and then duplicate tab, and then we are going to use this URL to get the information about all the interfaces on the router. Okay, so let's do this together. Let's return here, duplicate tab, and in the URL I'm going to use this one, and then send. And here I have all the information about the interfaces. As you can see here, this is the name of the interface, and here we have description VirtualBox. And as you can see here, there is IP version 4 nothing, and here IP version 6 nothing, because these interfaces are enabled or assigned using DHCP. Okay, let's continue with the next. What is the problem or the issue, and we are going to solve it. And you will see the IP address here in Postman. And as you can see here, it is mentioned that it's DHCP. But move forward, let's learn how to get information about a specific interface. And now we are going to get information only about interface Gigabit Ethernet 1. Again, we can go here and right click, duplicate tab, and here we change the IP address or the API. We click send, and here we have interface Gigabit Ethernet 01. Again, we have nothing here because these are assigned using DHCP. So let's check this together. And as you can see here, it's DHCP. And now let's change the IP address. To be 100, or this one actually. Configure terminal, interface Gigabit Ethernet 01. Or G1. And here we put the IP address. And then exit. Again, exit one more time. And show IP interface brief. Here we have the IP address, and here we have manual. Again, let's send again. And you can see here is the IP address, and here is the net mask put request. So now we are going to change to configure the device or the router using Postman, and here we are going to do the following. So first we are going to duplicate and modify the last GET request, duplicate the last REST request, which is this one, and here next to it we have the information says that for the type of the request you have to change it from put to get, or sorry, put. And then we have the interface, we have to call it loopback. Since I already have a loopback in the configuration of the router from the last lab, so I'm going to change the loopback to be, for example, 3 here. And then next to the header there is a body, and here is currently empty, so we are going to configure or put all the information in the body. Don't forget, since we still have problems, so let's try to copy from the previous one. Here we need to change the interface to be loopback 2. And the IP address also. and in the description we type hi, I am Loopback. Okay, so now it's fine. Bug interface is now configured. Now I'm going to make also show IP interface brief. Here we have Cisco123 exclamation mark. Here we need to type show IP interface brief. And as you can see here, the second loop created using Postman. Okay, we reached to part 6, and this part is about using Python script to send the GET request. Okay, so in this part we are going to repeat. We are going first to send the GET request, which is this one. Of course, we are going to use Python, and then in part 7 we are going to use like Python to send request. Okay, so let's minimize Postman. We don't need it anymore, and let's start with part 6, which is about send a GET request. Okay, so what we need to do, we need to create a new directory. The name of the directory is RESTCONF, and then we create a new file called restconfig by get.python. RESTCONF, the name of the directory, and we are going to use them again to create this file. What we need to put in this file, first we need to import JSON, of course, because we are going to send and receive data in a format of JSON. And then we need to import requests. You already know this because we are going to send and receive API. And then we need also the packages here for warnings. Okay, so let's keep them now in the file. And then we need to create the variables that will be the component of the request. Of course, we need to put the URL in this form in a variable. So the variable here, API URL, this is the URL of the IP address, and here we know that we have parameters, and here we are going to get all the interfaces, and here we are going to set the header or the headers. We did this, or we saw these in Postman. Now let's keep them in one line. And then we need to create a tuple, which is called basic authentication or basic AUTH. That was two key needed for the username and the password. Here, this is the Cisco and Cisco123 exclamation mark as a password. And then to create a variable to send a request and store the JSON response. And in this way, this is the response. And then here we send the request, and you can see here there is the URL, and here we have the authentication, and here we have the headers, and the verification is false because this server or this router is local. So we are going to use the local database. And here we have the table below list the various elements of the statement. Here we have the REST, and here the request, here the API URL, authentication, header, and the verification. And before running the file, I'm going also to print the file in a JSON format. So here what we need to include is this one, which is risk.json, and we put it in the variable here, and then I'm going to print the variable here. So we did this before in one of the previous labs. Okay, now let's save it. Here I made the file. I will, by mistake, I have to put this file inside the REST config, so I'm going to use move, and here is config, and then to REST config directory one more time, and here let's go to the REST config directory, and here we have the file, and now let's get this file run. And as you can see here, we have the output. Here we have the information listed in a format of JSON. Here we have the interfaces. Here we have the IP address. Here we have also the second IP address of the loopback, and so on. And here to prettify of the output, we can also use JSON dump. So we are going to use this one here. And as you can see here now, we have the configurations in this format. We have the first 1 gigabit Ethernet, and here we have the IP address. Here we have loopback 1. Here we have the IP address. Here we have loopback 2, and here we have the IP address here. Okay, so this is about getting the information. Now we are going to create another file which we will use put. So not get, so this is a put. And as you can see, it's a very simple program or application in Python. Now let's create another file which is restput.python. Again, then here we also need these modules. We need now to create a variable to put in it the URL itself, and here we are going to use loopback2. Since I already have loopback2, so I'm going to use now loopback3, because I already have loopback2. I mean, I did it with Postman, so now I'm going to add another loopback, which is 3, using Python. Here I have the headers, just like what I did in the previous application. Again, let's keep them in one line. Here I have also the authentications as the username and the password. And here I have to specify what I need to put, and you can see here the loopback2. I'm going to use a 3, and here I'm going to use another IP address. Okay, and we need now to keep them in the same format. I mean the spaces and indentations, because it's very necessary. Okay, hopefully it's going to be good. If it's not good, we can solve it again, and then we, after that, we need to send the request and put the variable in response variable here. Again, we put them in one line. And here we are going to check if the code is 200, so it's okay. Otherwise, we are going to print out an exception. Here we have an explanation variables. Okay, so I think now everything is fine. Let's save it and get it run. See, here we have a problem. It says that API URL is not defined. So let's check which one is this one. It's here, API. Okay, so let's now change the IP address to be, for example, 3.3. So the IP address of the loopback is going to be 10.133. Okay, let's save this one, get it run again. And as you can see here, the status is okay. So let's make sure from this, let's go here and type Cisco 123 exclamation mark, and then show IP interface brief. We should see loopback interface 3, and as you can see here now, it's available here. And we used the Python program, this one here. The problem was with the IP, with the URL as it was specified, so I changed this one here. I copy pasted again and it's working now. Actually, I took it from here. Okay, so let's see what we have to do more. That's all for this, and you will have the two programs, I mean the get Python get and the Python put in the description box. Thank you and see you next video.